Come on, bitch! It's Sonic Speed!
Yes! We are back, and yes, we're talking about anime. And I have no doubt in my mind that I probably would have liked this game, but I just missed the boat when Awakening came out. I didn't have a 3DS, and I didn't want to, like, play on 3DS. Long story, but I did not play on 3DS, so I just missed the boat of fan hype for Fire Emblem. And since then, I've never really been interested in their tactical RPG nature. The only real thing that interested me were the cute girls and relationship stuff.
Just shake that ass, bitch, and let me see what you got.
If we look at my handy-dandy Know Your Moves kill list, which is just a list of characters I have and haven't done in this series, we can see there's a big disparity between series I've done and ones I haven't. Namely Metroid, Kid Icarus, and Fire Emblem. I don't know anything about Fire Emblem, like, at all, man. This one looks like Balma, this one's Guts, this one has Big Booby. You know, I'd actually probably like this game if I I can get 35 orbs for $30. So while this video will mostly be on Marth, I'm basically grouping him with Roy and Lucina. Why? Because they're basically just Marth with some differences. I mean, one is fire and the other swings a regular sword. And this guy screams a lot. Dude, my mom's sleeping. Could you stop? Marth debuted in the first Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light, an interesting tactical RPG for the NES. Marth is the prince of a land called Altea, fighting to take it back from dragons. That's pretty cool. You know what's not? This gameplay. The first game released in 1990 for the NES and apparently played like a nightmare. So I'm guessing that's why they remade it. Twice. 3 times? Between the first game and Marth's first Smash appearance in 2001, there were already 6 entries to the series featuring different lords, settings, and waifus.
Just shake that ass, bitch, and let me see what you got.
Marth, for all intents and purposes, could have been Sigard or Leaf, but I suppose Sakurai wanted to go with the first lord that started the series. So here's a common question: why do Marth and Roy speak Japanese in Smash anyways? Ike, Robin, the rest of them don't. Well, when Melee was in development, the whole series at that time was Japanese exclusive. The series only came here after Smash in 2003, with Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance, or Blazing Blade as it's commonly known as. This game is actually the prequel to Roy's Japanese exclusive game, The Binding Blade, and it stars his father, Eliwood. When adding these characters, Sakurai was unsure if the 2 swordsmen would be excluded overseas because of their series and their Japanese-only nature. He says that was actually part of the reason Roy was added to help drive interest for this new game and franchise in the West. Some even claim the success of the series over here is thanks to these 2 swordsmen and their appearance in Melee. That's pretty cool. You know what isn't cool? Adding Lucina in Smash 4, even though Sakurai didn't want to add Chrom in Smash 4 because he thought it'd be too similar to Marth, but then Lucina was a costume, but then they added some mechanic and then that made her a character slot. It's just backward logic! Like Dr. Mario in Dark Pit, she was only added because she started off as a costume for Marth. But as they worked on her, she kind of became her own character, and once they added the differences between her sword and Marth's sword, Sakurai said it warranted her to have her own character slot. But let's get into the moves of the series' most iconic character, Marth. And, you know, the series is a tactical RPG. There's not a lot of moves being done here. It's a lot of stats and how it stacks up against your enemy. But what is good about this game, as opposed to other RPGs, is there's actual battle animations where we can see some of these moves being done, so that's the first place we're gonna look. First, let's look at how Marth wields the Falchion. A sword that deletes damage from non-dragon enemies, heals Marth, and is effective against dragons. Master Sword ain't got shit on this. Now obviously it isn't like this in Smash, that'd be broken. But what is interesting is that historically, Falchions don't even look like this. Historically, they're closer to scimitars than actual swords. Imagine if Marth actually had a Falchion, a big scimitar, with baggy pants, and a goatee. That'd be something. First we see him hold his Falchion up in the air, which is probably where they got his new Brawl taunt where he points it up in the air, and potentially his Thundercats up smash. The taunt has the sword sparkle on its tip, which could be a reference to this animation with the Miracle Sword. Next, his run, where he's close to the ground. his forward smash, where he slashes, and his jump when he jumps in the air after his attack. However, Marth gets this sword towards the end of his game. He actually utilizes many other swords, being in the Lord class of his games. One he gets at the very start of the game is the rapier. When he's using it, we can see his idle, walk, and forward tilt. Some of the re-released games reanimate some of these battle sequences, so it gives us more to work with. First, his battle entrance animation from Brawl onwards seems to be Marth utilizing the warp staff, which allows you to warp to other parts of the battlefield, which would make sense as to why he teleports into battle in Smash. Next, his back air sort of looks like this sword move he utilizes with the Falchion in Mystery of the Emblem. Now how about specials? First, Marth's attack with the regular sword looks like the shield breaker move from Brawl onwards, where it's more of a stabbing motion instead of that one from Melee. This may come from the fact that rapiers in the games are capable of damaging high defense enemy units, so it'd be able to break through shields quite well. Also, his counter animation looks similar to when he blocks an incoming enemy attack. But counters are a thing that you can do in the Fire Emblem games, just it's not an input, it more depends on your stats and how it stacks up against the enemy. I even stumbled upon something that could relate to Dancing Blade and Trachea 776. But with the introduction of skills, we have one called the Meteor Sword, which lets you attack an enemy multiple times in a row. Finally, Dolphin Slash. Not exactly sure on the reasoning behind the name, maybe GameCube's code name, maybe it's because you flip up in the air like a dolphin. Hey, Melee modders, can you actually add that sound effect to the episode? Oh, thank you, perfect. But regardless, this seems to be taken from that Trachea game, where when those in the Swordmaster class are in critical condition, they do a different attack animation when they go in. Finally, Marth, Roy, and Lucina's final smash. They're all critical hits, and they relate pretty accurately to the same type of attack in the Fire Emblem games. If you go in to attack an enemy unit that's far weaker than you, you perform a critical hit on them. This essentially wipes their life bar in a similar fashion to what you see in Smash, as they even put the little Fire Emblem UI there to show you, yeah, you're fucked. Marth and Lucina's animation is very similar to the first Fire Emblem game. Roy's, however, relates to his critical hit from his own game, where it does in fact make a fiery explosion when he does a ranged attack on an enemy unit. This could also be the inspiration behind his neutral special, where it makes a very fiery explosion, and he screams, "Stop screaming, my mom's asleep!" Now there are a ton of cosmetic references sprinkled upon the Fire Emblem series and their characters to bring more life into them and to make reference to their series. One of the most obvious ones is the series icon, the Falchion, the sword Marth wields. But I'm kind of at odds with it because the series is called Fire Emblem. There is a Fire Emblem in many of these games, so why not make the series icon the Fire Emblem? Okay, I told you we don't talk about that. Anyways, let's go through all their costumes. This may mean a lot to you Fire Emblem fans because there's a lot of references. First, Marth. His melee outfit references the first Fire Emblem game, while this newer one is from the updated version in New Mystery of the Emblem. His green and red costumes make reference to enemy and ally units in the Fire Emblem games, Leaf and Roy's color scheme, and his artwork in Awakening. Roy's new costume is sort of a mixture between his appearance in his original game and his Awakening appearance. His costumes reference characters such as Marcus, Eliwood, Zephyl, Cecilia, and Bors from Binding Blade. And finally, Lucina, who, brace your waifus, has a lot of references to Awakening. Green, Naui. Black, Shershay. White, Cordelia. Red, Tiki. Yellow, Lissa. Purple, Samia. And navy, Thought. Thought! And since we're going into all the references, we may as well settle the case on what these guys are saying in Japanese. Of course, I mean Marth and Roy's victory animations in Melee and now Smash 4. You know, I always thought his taunt said, "Minna, mite kure." But that's a bit culturally insensitive. Here are the translations to each of their lines. So that's it for all the moves I can find and references to the Fire Emblem series, but I was not satisfied. I don't think Sakurai puts these things together arbitrarily. I think there's something holding them together, and I wanted to locate what the exact theme for these characters were, the theme of Marth, Roy, and Lucina, and why they were designed the way they are. Yeah, you know, they're often looked down upon, but I do think they help guide the viewer through the video's topics, and stylistically they're easy to implement. Anyways, Marth, Roy, and Lucina. I remember when I was a youngin' and I first unlocked Marth and Roy in Melee, and from that time, even back then, I could tell that they were very different characters. They were very different from the rest of the cast that was in Smash Bros. A lot of them were happy-go-lucky, colorful, bright, but they were more serious, and they gave off that tone through their movements and their moves, and I don't think I'm the only one that sees that, because they have very heavy manga and anime influences in their design, because they were Japanese only for a time. So let's look at that and how realistic they were when we look into the design of their moves. Let's start with Marth. To learn about Marth's design, we gotta consider what Sakurai was feeling during Melee's development. Back in the day, Link was the only swordsman in Smash. I guess except for Kirby, but that's not really a sword. So when it came to Marth, a character solely focused on...
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side! Wait,
Sakurai wanted his playstyle to heavily reflect both his royalty and his sharp wits with a sword. This is what inspired Marth's strong-tipped sword, as Sakurai wanted Marth to be a swordsman that would play around his opponents with speed and precision, almost dancing around them. He also designed Marth to be quick, have good combo moves, and have high damage tipper moves. This, however, was at the cost of weak launch distance, weak throws, and a weak recovery. It's like right from the design document, Sakurai intentionally made this character good, except for those grabs which were supposed to be weak. I sort of think all of these things were taken from attributes Marth has in his games. And the fact that he's a sword wielder, at least in the newer games, suggests he has a faster base speed with lower damage, which I'd hazard to guess is the reason Sakurai made him move the way he does in Smash. I also want to throw this out there that the tipper moves may also be a reference to the fact that Marth initially utilized a rapier. These swords are very powerful for stabbing and striking, but not so much for high damage. Now, what about Lucina and Roy? Roy, for all intents and purposes, is just a Marth clone, where instead of slashes he gets fire, and instead of a tipper he gets... the hilt. Well, interestingly, Sakurai defends this design choice by saying that in Roy's own game, when his father falls ill, he's unexpectedly called to lead his units. He was only 15. Even at the beginning of his game, he has shaky base stats. In this sense, it can be said that Roy is more inexperienced than Marth, making his playstyle more rough and in your face. Even his sword, the Sword of Seals, is canonically a sword that emits fire, so this explosive gameplay style is kinda symbolic. And to further cement this in, when Roy was added as DLC in the new Smash Bros., Sakurai made it so Roy turns his sword around so the hilt can do more damage, making him one of the most stylish swordsmen in all the games. It's a nice touch and I actually really find it funny. Finally, Lucina. Okay, that was bad, I'm sorry. She's fine. She's fine, okay? She's cute, she's tough, she's like, out of 5, she's like a 2. Lucina doesn't really have a whole lot of differences in her moveset from Marth, because, well, she was originally going to be a costume. In Awakening, she actually impersonates Marth for the beginning, so, I mean, it makes sense. She even wields the parallel falchion, being sort of an incomplete clone of the falchion. Let's not get mixed up on the details. It's time travel. I don't even want to deal. Interestingly, in Smash, it makes it so the damage output of the sword is consistent throughout, whereas Marth's is strong at the tip and weak towards the hilt. I believe this is sort of symbolic to her holding the parallel falchion, as well as impersonating her ancestor Marth, but Sakurai allowing her to breathe as her own character, I guess it's a nice love letter to Awakening. Whoop-de-doo, wee! I know I say this a lot, but Fire Emblem's success could be owed to these characters being added to Smash Bros. Sakurai recognized Smash as a chance for these characters to shine and be shown to Western audiences, and I mean, it must hold a part in the success of the series and how it's successful here now. And I mean, it's just crazy to me because way back in 2001, I didn't know these characters. I just saw them as random old swordsmen. They were anime swordsmen, and now this series is held to such high degree, such a high standard, and everyone loves it. So even though I don't like the series, I'm happy to see it grow and be so successful. Yeah, Sakurai did kind of get carried away, but, you know, I'm just going to leave it at that and mark these guys off my kill list so I do not have to talk about them again. Whew, getting through Fire Emblem. But I asked the question, who do you want to see next? All the bright characters are up for grabs, and if they're grayed out, well, they've been done before. We're halfway through all the Smash characters, and I'm hoping we can get through all of them before the next Smash is released. If you want to see a character, recommend them down below. I take suggestions, and you know, popular demand kind of can help. Anyways, I'd like to say thank you to my Patreon supporters. They help make these videos possible by providing for me every bit of every month. Last month, you may have noticed that I put out some non-Know Your Moves videos. You may have been waiting for this one, and it's only possible through sponsorships, but also Patreon. So thank you all my patrons. Rewards for the $10 tier will happen soon, so if you want to get in on that, you can start to donate now. Other than that, yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you all for your support, liking, everything you do. It helps me out. I'm gonna be at Super Smash Con this week. That may not mean anything in a couple months, but I'm gonna be there this week, so see you there if you are there. Anyways, take it easy. I will see you on the flip side.